The basin stretched out flat and dry in every direction, the kind of place where a man could ride half a day and see nothing but dirt, scrub, and sky. The sun hung low and mean, dragging long shadows behind the rocks. The air smelled like chalk and old sweat. Wind kicked up dust in little bursts that stung the eyes and never stopped for long. Eli Mercer sat in the saddle with a blank stare, boots firm in the stirrups, reins held loose in his left hand. His right hand rested near the rifle tied beside his leg. He'd been riding since dawn, not chasing anything, not running either, just moving like he'd done for years now. He didn't carry much. Bedroll, tin cup, some jerky wrapped in cloth. The bare tools of a man who didn't plan on staying anywhere too long. He didn't trust the ground under him, or the people who might cross it. Eli had served in the Confederate ranks when he was just a boy. He hadn't wanted to fight, but where he'd come from, you didn't say no to the men with rifles and orders. He'd survived the war, lost a few fingers, came back with a long scar down his face, and something colder than memory settled deep behind his eyes. After the surrender, he drifted, took on bounty work for a time, then gave that up when it started to feel like he was hunting himself. He didn't believe in much now. No country, no flag, only a man's word, if that meant anything anymore. That evening, the horse slowed on its own. Eli sat up straighter in the saddle. The gelding's ears twitched, head turning slightly toward a low thicket of brush a few yards off the path. It wasn't the kind of movement that came from wind. It was subtle, quick, like something alive was hiding. Eli stopped the horse, stepped down without a word. Every muscle in his back stayed tense as he reached for the rifle. Years of habit kept his hands quiet. He moved toward the brush, slow and ready. His boots crunched against the dry earth. He didn't rush, just took his time, eyes scanning the brush line for the glint of a barrel or the flick of a tail. Then he saw her, crouched low, one leg twisted under her, blood dried down the side of her calf. She was barefoot on one foot. The other wore a worn-out moccasin with the sole coming loose. Her dress, deerskin, torn across the front and crusted with travel grime, barely covered her knees. Her arms trembled, but her eyes didn't. They stayed locked on him. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She just raised her hands slowly, palms out, and spoke through a cracked, dry throat. "Please don't shoot me." Her voice was raw but steady. Then, after a beat, "If you don't, I'll give you a child." Eli didn't move. His heart didn't race. It tightened. He stared at her, took her in. Apache, by the look of the tattoo on her wrist. Maybe mid-20s. Starved, dirty, bruised, but not broken. She had pride in her posture, even sitting half-buried in the brush. Her words hadn't been seductive. They were stripped, hollow, spoken like a woman who'd had to say worse things before. Eli kept the rifle pointed her way, not because he wanted to shoot, because he'd been in places where hesitation got a man dead. She didn't blink, just held her position, waiting. He could have left her there, could have backed away and kept riding west. She wasn't his problem, but the way she looked at him, like she expected to die and had already made peace with it, stuck in his gut. He lowered the rifle. She flinched, but barely. He crouched down, not close, just enough to reach into his coat and pull out the tin flask. He didn't throw it, just placed it on the ground between them. Then stood, stepped back 3 paces, and waited. She watched him, then the flask. Her hands trembled again. She crawled forward, slow, cautious, picked up the flask and drank. Small sips, just enough to wet her throat. Her breathing eased a little. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Eli said nothing, just turned and walked back to the horse. The sun had dropped lower, casting a pale red tint across the basin. He mounted up again, turned the horse sideways, looked back once, motioned with his chin. She didn't move. He waited. Wind pressed her dress against her legs, whipped her braid against her face. Finally, she pushed herself upright, winced at her ankle, then limped after him. One step at a time. No words, no trust, just instinct. They didn't go far. Half a mile down the slope, near a flat rock shelf, Eli made camp. It was nothing special. He made 100 like it. A shallow fire pit, some brush piled for heat, one worn blanket, a battered skillet. He tied the horse, gathered some twigs, and sparked the fire. She stayed back, standing with weight on one foot, arms crossed, watching him like she still expected him to turn and strike. He took out some jerky, laid a piece on a rock near the fire, then backed away from it. She didn't move until he sat down across from her. Even then, she only took it once he looked away. The silence held. Not tense, just full. There was nothing to say that would change what either of them had been through. The fire cracked. He passed her a canteen. She drank and wiped her hands on her dress, slow and careful. He noticed the 3 small scars on her shoulder, like someone had tried to brand her and given up halfway. Night came heavy and dry. Coyotes howled in the distance. She didn't lie near the fire. She stayed on the edge of the circle, half sitting, knees up, arms wrapped around them. Her eyes stayed open long after his closed. Eli lay back on his bedroll, head against the saddle, rifle at his side. He didn't sleep deep. Never did. In the dark, he thought about the way she'd said it. If you don't, I'll give you child. Not a threat. Not a bargain. Just something left over from too much pain. Like she didn't know any other way to ask to be spared. He didn't pity her. That wasn't the right word. But something about her made him stay when he'd spent years leaving. She hadn't run, and neither had he. Morning came slow over the basin, lighting the red stone cliffs in a soft, dry glow. The air was still and cold, and ash from the night's fire curled up in thin spirals before dissolving into the breeze. Eli woke before first light, as he always did. No dreams, no noise, just the flat return of consciousness like a chore that had to be done. He sat up, rolled his neck once, and checked his rifle. Nothing moved in the distance but the rising light. She was still there, curled against a flat rock, arms wrapped around herself, chin tucked low. She hadn't come close to the fire through the night. Eli figured she hadn't slept much. Her body stayed still, but her eyes opened the moment he shifted. He didn't speak, just stood, stretched his legs, and started gathering dry grass and brush to bring the fire back. He saw the way her hands gripped her elbows, the way her body flinched at the snap of every twig. It wasn't fear of him, not directly. It was fear from something older, something already done. When the fire caught, he set water to boil, dug out a bit of ground corn and stirred it in. Nothing more than thin mush, but warm. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He just set a tin cup of it on a flat rock near her and backed away again. She waited until he turned to tend the saddle. Then she ate, quiet and quick, scraping the last bits from the tin with her finger. He heard it, but didn't look. He glanced at her ankle. It was swollen, purple along the bone. She wouldn't get far if she tried to run, but she didn't seem like she would. She just sat with her arms tucked tight, eyes sweeping the ridges, watching everything. He finally spoke. "What's your name?" She looked at him like she wasn't sure if it was a trick. Then she said, "Ayasha." He nodded once. "I'm Eli." She didn't repeat it. He poured water on the fire and packed the cooking tin away. The day was heating up already, and they'd need to move before sun reached full height. He didn't ask if she wanted to come. He didn't give orders. He just mounted the horse, looked back, and waited. She got up slow, limped hard on the injured foot, but didn't ask for help. He noticed the way she bit the inside of her cheek to keep from groaning. He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he leaned down and gave her a short nod toward the saddle horn. "You ride. I'll walk." She hesitated, then climbed up stiffly with both hands gripping the saddle. He handed her the reins, just loose in her lap. She didn't say thank you. They moved west, Eli walking with the horse in tow, Ayasha silent above him. The land opened wider as they went. Scrub turned to rock, rock to clay. By mid-morning, Eli found a dry wash that cut between two ridges. Shaded, defensible, and quiet. Good place to rest. He led the horse down through the gap, checking for tracks. None. They stopped under a shelf of stone. He tied the horse and removed the saddle to let it cool. Ayasha slid down and leaned against the rock wall. She winced, holding her ankle. Finally, Eli crouched beside her. He took out a strip of cloth from his pack and tore it into thinner wraps. Gonna bind it. You don't talk, I won't either. She gave the smallest nod. When he touched her foot, she stiffened but didn't pull away. He worked quiet, wrapping tight, but not cruel. Her skin was bruised bad. He didn't ask how long she'd been on it. He could guess. You escaped, he said. Not a question, a statement. Ayasha didn't respond right away. Then, traders. 3 of them. Drunk. Got lazy near the river. I ran. He kept rapping. They chase you. They tried. I lost them in the rocks. When? 4 days. He tied the cloth off with a knot and sat back. Water? She asked, voice dry again. He handed her the canteen. She drank slow, in measured sips, then wiped her mouth and passed it back. There was a long stretch of silence. Then she spoke again. What are you doing out here? Eli didn't look at her. Riding? Looking for something? He shook his head. No, just not ready to stop. She looked down at her hands. The dirt under her nails, the way her wrist bore that ink tattoo from her people. 3 horizontal lines, black and faded, marking family, clan, and spirit. She rubbed it like it no longer meant anything. You used to fight, she said. He gave a quiet exhale through his nose. Yeah. For who? He turned his head slightly, not enough to face her. Didn't matter then. Doesn't matter now. She didn't ask more. They stayed in that shaded gap until late afternoon. She dozed a little. He stood lookout. Nothing moved. No riders. No dust trails. Just wind and rock. When it was time to move, she didn't ask where they were going. And he didn't explain. The plan wasn't a plan. It was just forward. Away from men who might be hunting her. Away from the flat memory of places he never wanted to return to. That night, they stopped near a shallow ravine with dry grass and a bit of creek water. Eli made fire again. She helped this time, gathering brush, stacking twigs. She still didn't talk much. Neither did he. But when he passed her a piece of jerky and a chunk of bread, she said quietly, I didn't mean it about the child. He looked at her. She didn't look back. I know, he said. Then he handed her the blanket. And this time, she didn't refuse. She lay near the fire. Not close, but not at the edge anymore. That night, she slept with both eyes closed. And he kept watch, same as always. But not just for her anymore. And still, neither of them ran. At dawn, the fire was little more than ash and scattered coal. A faint column of smoke drifted into the pale morning air, caught and pulled by a passing wind. Ayasha stirred before Eli did this time. She sat up slowly, rubbing her ankle, then pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. For a moment, she just sat in silence, watching the sky change color behind the ridge. The light touched the side of her face and showed how young she really was. Too young for the weight she carried in her eyes. Eli opened his eyes a few minutes later. No sudden motion, just a quiet shift in breathing. Then the same routine. Check the rifle, stretch the bad hand, roll to one side, sit up. He didn't speak, but Ayasha noticed his eyes went first to her, checking she was still there, still alive, still whole. Then to the horse. Then the horizon. She helped him gather firewood this time. Her limp was worse, but she didn't complain. He saw her dragging a small branch through the dirt, jaw tight, sweat beading on her brow. When he reached to take it from her, She didn't hand it over, just held on a moment longer before letting go. Pride mixed with exhaustion. They ate in silence. Eli handed her half of a smoked rabbit he'd caught in a trap the night before. She peeled the meat off the bone carefully, eating every scrap. Neither of them said much. Words weren't needed. But Eli had noticed something the night before. She was shifting. Not just physically, but mentally. She was settling into the space around them. Trust wasn't there yet. Not full, but suspicion had stopped growing. Still, he knew there were questions, unspoken things she was holding on to. And he had a few himself. They broke camp by mid-morning. Eli helped Ayasha onto the horse again. Her ankle was no better, maybe worse. They took a slower path this time, following the edge of the ridge, keeping cover. He wasn't sure where they were going yet, just away from roads, away from towns, away from the kind of men who looked at women like Ayasha the way they looked at trade goods. After an hour of slow riding, Ayasha finally spoke. "Why didn't you take me up on what I said?" He looked ahead, not at her. "Didn't want to. That's not what most men would have done. I ain't most men." She studied the side of his face, the scar along his jaw, the hard set of his shoulders. She didn't push further. Later that day, they passed a ravaged campfire site, a ring of blackened stone, some broken wood, footprints pressed deep in the dirt. Ayasha tensed. Eli saw her eyes narrow. She pointed to the tracks, her voice low. "Those were moccasins, but not mine." Eli crouched near the tracks, ran his fingers along the edge. 3 men, maybe 4, heavy, carrying weight, passed through maybe a day ago. She swallowed hard. "They followed me." Eli stood and scanned the ridgeline. His jaw tightened. "They'll be ahead now. If they loop back, we'll know. Will they come this way? If they're looking, they might. But they won't expect you to move so slow. We got time." She looked at him. "Would you fight them?" "If they come near you, yeah." That ended the conversation. They made camp again near a cracked creek bed surrounded by scrub oak. The water was low, but enough for washing and refilling canteens. Eli let her soak her ankle in the cold stream. She sat with her legs in the water, skirt pulled just above the knee. Her eyes stayed on the trees, always alert, always measuring the edge between safety and danger. Eli sat nearby, stripping bark from stick. After a long while, he said, "You got anyone left?" "Tribe. Family." Ayasha didn't answer at first. Then, "They think I'm dead. You want to go back to them?" Another pause. Then, "Not like this." She didn't explain, and Eli didn't ask, but the weight in her voice said everything. What had been taken from her, body, choice, time, couldn't just be returned by walking back into camp. Pride meant something. She wasn't going to let them see her until she felt whole again. Eli understood that. That night, she helped make the fire. He gave her his blanket without a word, lay down on the bare ground. She didn't argue, but before lying down, she sat by the fire a while longer, just watching him. After some time, she said quietly, "You were alone when you found me. You're still alone. I don't mind it, but you keep looking over your shoulder. Habit." She didn't say more, but in the silence that followed, she shifted her sleeping spot closer to his, just by a foot. Not touching, not trusting, but closer. Eli stayed awake longer than usual that night, listening, thinking. Something had shifted again, slow and quiet. She hadn't run, and now she was choosing to stay. They moved again at first light, the land still cold and quiet under a thin gray sky. Eli's horse walked slow along the ridgeline, its hooves crunching on scattered stone. Ayasha sat the saddle upright, despite the pain in her ankle. She didn't wince like before, just gripped the horn tighter when the path jolted her. She was learning how to ride without showing weakness. Eli didn't mention it, but he noticed. They were heading toward a stretch of shallow canyons he knew from years ago. A place without water, but with shelter good enough to disappear into for a while. Eli didn't tell her much about it. He didn't explain where he was leading them. But he chose it for a reason. If those traders were still tracking, the canyons would give them a place to wait, listen, and see without being seen. By mid-morning, the landscape began to change. Rockier terrain, dry gullies carved by storms long gone, stone walls closing in. As they moved between two high ridges, Ayasha broke the silence. "How did you lose those fingers?" Eli looked at the path ahead. "Shot clean off. Vicksburg. Sniper. Took 2 of us. You were lucky." He gave a short nod. "Other man died slow. I didn't." She waited a beat. "Did you ever go back east?" "No. Nothing there for me." Ayasha didn't say anything after that. But a few minutes later, she shifted in the saddle and pointed to a cut in the ridge. "There's a good view up there," she said. "I could see smoke or movement from that height." Eli stopped and looked at her. It was the first time she'd suggested anything. He nodded. "I'll climb it." She shook her head. "I will. You stay with the horse." He didn't like it, but he understood. She wanted to prove something. To herself, maybe. To him. So he helped her down, steadying her arm as she stepped onto the stone. She didn't pull away this time. He watched her limp up the slope, slower than she wanted to be, but steady. When she reached the top, she crouched low behind a boulder and stayed there a long time. Eli waited below, one hand resting on a rifle, eyes scanning the path behind them. He didn't like standing still this long in one place. It made him itch inside, but she had earned the chance to look for herself. She came down after a while. Face calm. "Nothing out there." "You sure?" "I know what to look for." They continued on. By late afternoon, they found an old cattle trail snaking through the base of the canyon. Abandoned long ago, scattered with dry dung and broken fence posts. Eli stopped beside a shaded alcove in the rock and decided to make camp. The place was hard to see from the higher trails, and the wind didn't cut as sharp here. They built the fire in a crack between boulders to keep it from being seen. That evening, Ayasha took out a strip of rawhide from her dress hem and began to braid her hair. Eli sat nearby, sharpening a knife on a flat stone. The air between them felt less tight now. Not relaxed, but less cautious. She said, "The men who took me, they weren't the first, just the last." Eli looked at her, then backed his knife. "They came at night," she said. "I was gathering firewood. I was supposed to be gone for 10 minutes. It was 3 months before I saw Sky again." He didn't interrupt. "I escaped because one of them passed out drunk on watch. He left the gate unlocked. I ran barefoot, found a stream, hid under a dead log for 2 days." She didn't speak like she wanted sympathy, just like she needed the truth to be real in someone else's head. Eli said, "They won't touch you again." Ayasha looked at him, her voice low, steady. "Would you kill for me?" "Yes." He didn't say it with anger or fire, just plain, like stating what time it was. She watched him another few seconds, then nodded once. "All right." Later that night, as darkness took the sky, Eli set out traps a few yards from camp. Wire loops for rabbits, nothing loud, nothing flashy. Ayasha helped him tie one of the lines, her hands moving with more certainty now. They didn't speak much, but there was less space between their movements. When they settled near the fire, she sat closer this time. The blanket stretched between them. Not shared, not touching, but a mutual line now, not a boundary. She asked, "What did you do before the war?" Eli thought for a while. "Worked a mule team with my father. Freight hauling. Arkansas side." "What happened to him?" "Drank himself into the ground." "I was 16. She didn't ask more. She just stared into the fire. Then, quietly, "You don't ask about me. Not the old things. I figured you'd say when you were ready." She nodded. "Maybe I'm ready now." He looked at her. She didn't speak again, but she didn't look away either. She stayed by the fire that night. When the wind picked up, Eli offered the coat from his saddlebag. She took it, pulled it over her knees, and slept sitting up. Eli stayed awake longer than usual, his rifle across his lap, his eyes scanning the stars above the canyon walls. They didn't have a destination, but she was still here, and so was he. The canyon air was colder that morning, the kind that settled into bone. Eli woke to the sharp crack of something snapping under weight. Not close, but not far either. His hand was on the rifle before his eyes were fully open. He stayed still, listening. Just a rabbit, maybe a deer. He let his breath out slow and looked to his left. Ayasha was already awake, sitting upright with his coat still draped around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the canyon wall, same direction as the sound had come from. She looked at him, calm but alert. That wasn't wind. No, he said, rising to his feet, but it wasn't boots either. They stayed low most of the morning, breaking camp quickly and leaving no trace. No coals, no wrappers, no footprints if they could help it. Ayasha helped pack the saddle, tying the bundle tight even with her bad ankle. She was moving better now, limping less. The swelling had gone down some. Her ankle would never be perfect, but it wouldn't keep her in one place anymore. They climbed out of the canyon using a game trail Eli had found years earlier, a narrow, winding path between two walls of cracked sandstone. He kept his rifle across his back, but within reach. Every 30 paces, he paused and looked behind. He didn't like how quiet it had gotten. Even the birds had stopped calling. At the top, they reached open ground again. Wind rolled across the flats in hard, steady bursts. The prairie looked endless from up there. Low hills, brush, a single dirt road cutting across in the far distance. Ayasha squinted at it, then looked away. Too exposed, she said. He agreed. They headed east instead, moving along a lower ridge where brush and fallen rock offered more cover. Around noon, they stopped in a dry basin with a narrow stream trickling through the middle. Eli let the horse drink. Ayasha removed her moccasins and dipped her feet into the cold water. She said nothing, but Eli saw the relief on her face. "Do you believe in anything?" she asked after a while. He didn't answer at first. Then, not much. Not God. No. Not spirits. No. She looked at him. "You ever lose anyone?" He nodded once. "My brother. In Georgia. Took a bayonet through the chest." She didn't ask for details. "What about you?" he asked. Ayasha's jaw tensed. "My sister. Little. They killed her when they took me. I think they meant to scare me. They did." She said it like it had been coiled inside her, waiting to be said. They moved on again by mid-afternoon, staying low, quiet. Eli made a point to double back once, just to see if they were being followed. No tracks. No movement. But his gut still pulled tight. Too much silence. Too much open sky. It felt like the world had paused. They stopped near dusk, in the shadow of a thick rock outcropping shaped like a broken spine. The fire was small and hidden between stones. Ayasha took charge of cooking what little they had. A single squirrel from a snare, cleaned and roasted. She used a flat rock to grind some dried corn Eli had been carrying in his pack. Her hands moved steady now. She didn't flinch. She didn't pause to look around anymore. When she handed Eli his share, she finally asked the thing that had been building since the first night. "Why didn't you leave me?" Eli sat back, eating slow. "I've left plenty," he said. "Didn't feel right this time. Because I'm weak?" "No, because you were alone." She studied his face a long moment. "You feel responsible for me now." He looked at her. "Do you want me to?" "No," she said. Then quieter. "Not unless it's your choice." "It is." That seemed to settle something in her. Later, as the fire died down, Ayasha took the saddle blanket and lay closer. Not quite touching him, but close enough to feel the heat of his body. Eli sat upright, eyes fixed on the stars overhead. "Tomorrow," he said, We head into the basin near Elk Creek. There's a half-burned cabin there. Used to belong to a family. Roof's half caved in, but the stone chimney still stands. Might be shelter enough for a few nights. She nodded. You been there before? Years ago, when I was still carrying bounty posters. Anyone ever with you? No. Then why stay now? You thought about that a moment. Because I don't want to ride past you. She didn't speak after that. But when she lay down, she reached out and let the edge of her hand rest lightly against his side. Not grasping, not holding, just contact. Eli didn't move away. And in the silence, that meant more than any vow could have. The air was damp with early mist when they reached the burned cabin at Elk Creek. Charred beams leaned sideways, blackened from the inside out. One wall had collapsed entirely. The roof was half gone, but the stone chimney stood solid against the pale sky. Eli tied the horse near a broken fence post, walked a slow circle around the site, checking the area for tracks, signs of life. There were none. The place was dead and had been for a long time. Ayesha stepped through what had once been a doorway. Her eyes moved slow across the ruins, fire-blistered floorboards, a rusted kettle tipped on its side, one boot missing its pair near the hearth. A child doll lay in the corner, half melted, head split from heat. She knelt beside it, stared at it for a long time. Eli didn't interrupt. He gave her space. She didn't cry, but something in her shoulders sank. He walked to the back of the cabin, where a partial wall still held. There, beneath the angled roof timbers, was enough cover from the weather to serve for sleep. He cleared out the ash and debris with his boot, then laid down their gear. The ground was uneven but dry. "This'll do," he said. Ayesha stood in the center of the ruined room, her arms crossed tight. "Who were they?" "I don't know," Eli said. "Came through here a few winters back. Saw the smoke from miles out. Could have been bandits. Could have been cavalry. Could have been hunger." She nodded slowly. "They left everything behind, where they had nothing to carry. They spent the afternoon repairing what they could." Eli propped up one of the beams with a long branch he cut from a dead mesquite. Ayesha stacked stones around the edge of the wall to stop the wind from cutting through. She barely limped now. The ankle was healing, slower than it should have, but steady. She kept moving. She didn't sit still unless forced. Eli watched her work from a few paces away. She didn't ask for help. He offered a few things, his knife, a piece of rope, a hand steadying the beam. But mostly, she did the work herself. She wanted to be useful. Or maybe she just wanted to prove she didn't need saving anymore. By sunset, they had a serviceable shelter. Not warm, not safe, but hidden and dry. Eli lit a small fire in the old hearth. Smoke curled up the chimney clean. It felt strange, standing inside walls again. He hadn't done that in months. Ayesha stood near the doorway. "You ever live in a place like this?" Eli shook his head. "We had a shack near the edge of cotton field. Dirt floor. No chimney. Worse than this. You left it. Burned it myself when my mother died. Nothing to stay for." She looked at him a moment. "I had a place. Longhouse on the west side of the mountains. Warm. Loud. Always food cooking. You miss it?" "Yes." He waited, but she didn't say more. Later, after they ate what was left of the jerky and a bit of cornmeal mash, Ayesha took out a small bundle she'd been carrying in the bottom of her pack. She unwrapped it carefully, cloth worn thin from handling. Inside was a single obsidian pendant tied with sinew, shaped into a sharp-edged feather. She handed it to him. "This is from my sister," she said. "She made it before they took us. I wore it around my neck until the first trader pulled it off. I found it again in a pile of rags at their camp. Took it when I escaped." Eli held it in his hand. It was light but jagged. "I don't wear it anymore," she said, "but I keep it close." He handed it back without a word. She rewrapped it and tucked it away. That night, as the fire faded low in the hearth, Ayasha laid down close to Eli, close enough that their shoulders brushed under the blanket. Her eyes stayed open. "Would you stay here?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. "It's quiet," he said, "but we'd be seen eventually. This place is too close to the old cattle road. Even now, I know how to tell when something's too quiet." She closed her eyes for a moment. "How long will we keep running?" "As long as we have to." "Would you keep running if I stop?" He looked at her. Her face was turned toward the fire, the light cutting across her cheekbone and brow. "No," he said. "If you stop, I stop." Her hand found his under the blanket. "Fingers cold, light." "Then I'll think about stopping," she whispered. Eli didn't move, didn't speak. Outside, wind pressed against the half walls, rattling loose stones. Inside, they stayed still together, not just hiding, not just surviving, but beginning to choose. The morning after was quiet, but not in the wrong way. Not the kind of silence that warned of something stalking nearby. It was the quiet of a place settling into itself, windless, calm, still. Inside the half-ruined cabin, Eli stirred first. He sat up slow, careful not to wake Ayasha. Her hand was still resting near his, blanket drawn to her chin, breathing even and soft. The first light from the chimney slit cast long shadows across the fire-blackened floor. Eli got up, checked the traps he'd set near the tree line, and found one rabbit, already stiff and cold. He cleaned it behind the cabin, away from where she slept. The act was mechanical. Hands worked from memory. He'd done this 1,000 times, skinning, cutting, boiling bones for broth, but today he moved slower. Not tired, just present. When Ayasha woke, she didn't startle. She sat up, adjusted the coat around her shoulders, and met his eyes without hesitation. There was no distance in her gaze anymore. Only alertness, only awareness. He handed her the cooked meat wrapped in cloth. "Eat." She did, without a word. They ate near the fire, sitting side by side, elbows nearly touching. Afterward, she said, "You ever think of stopping for good?" "Sometimes." "What stopped you before?" Eli looked into the fire. "I didn't have a reason." Ayasha's hands rested in her lap. "And now?" "I don't know," he said. Then after a pause, "Maybe." She nodded like that answer made sense. Later that day, they walked the perimeter of the cabin together. Ayasha moved easier, ankle stronger. She didn't lean on anything. They worked without talking, clearing fallen branches, stacking stones along the back wall, reinforcing the weak side of the roof with deadwood they hauled from the creek bed. It wasn't about building a home. Not yet. But it was something. Labor done side by side, without pressure or plan. Just action. Around midday, Ayasha climbed the ridge above the cabin with Eli's spyglass. She scanned the horizon. When she came back, her face was different, tense. "Riders," she said. 3 of them. Maybe 4. Moving slow, west to east. Eli stood. "How far?" "Half a day out. Maybe more." He looked at the sun, did the math. "Could pass right by. Or they could be tracking." She nodded. "They're not in a rush." "That's worse." They packed what they could in under 10 minutes. Bedroll, food, the flint and tinder, rifle canteens. Eli saddled the horse, checked the cinch twice, and helped Ayasha up. "North," he said. "Hard land. Less trail. They won't follow easy." She didn't argue. She held tight as the horse climbed the ridge and dropped into a canyon Eli remembered from his bounty days. They rode quiet, speaking only to point out loose rock or change direction. The wind picked up, dust lifting off the dry ground like smoke. They made camp that night near the mouth of a narrow pass, tucked deep between walls of red rock. Eli lit no fire. They ate cold meat and shared one blanket for warmth. Ayasha said, "Do you think they were following me?" "Still. Could be," Eli said, "or it could be nothing. But we don't take chances. They're white men." He nodded. "Probably. Her jaw tightened. "I won't go back. I'd rather die out here." "You won't." She looked at him. "What if they find us?" Eli's voice was steady. "Then I shoot first." She didn't question it. That night, with the stars overhead and no roof above them, Ayasha shifted close and rested her head on his shoulder. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I don't want to keep running forever." Eli sat still, then answered, "Then we find somewhere they won't come." "Where's that?" He looked into the dark canyon beyond the fireless camp, where no one's looking for anything but quiet. She nodded once and closed her eyes. What the story hadn't said so far, but was becoming clear now, was that both of them were building towards something. It wasn't about escape anymore. It was about ending the need for escape. And maybe, if the land held, if time gave them room, it would be about staying. Not just beside each other, but with each other. Not to repay a debt, not to owe anything, just because neither of them had turned away. They woke before the sun rose. The canyon air was cold enough to numb fingers, and Eli moved stiffly as he rolled up the blanket. Ayasha stood already, shoulders hunched, scanning the narrow path they'd ridden into the night before. Her expression hadn't changed much from the night prior. Tight, focused, ready. Something in her had shifted again. The fear was still there, but now it ran beneath the surface, replaced by purpose. Eli checked the horse's hooves for cracks and adjusted the saddle. Ayasha tied up her braid without speaking, then helped him tighten the pack. They moved in sync, wordless and quick. They knew they couldn't stay in this place long. If the riders had followed their tracks into the canyon, they'd be boxed in. Eli knew it. She knew it. As they rode east through the narrow cut between the cliffs, Eli did something he hadn't done in days. He looked back. No movement, no sound, just rising wind and the empty echo of hooves against stone. After an hour, they reached higher ground, where the land opened wide again. Low hills, dusty brush, dry earth stretching out without end. In the distance, a cluster of pine trees marked what Eli remembered as a hunting hollow. A place he and two other scouts had camped years before, back when he still wore a badge for a county that no longer existed. He hadn't thought about that stretch of time in years. He didn't want to. "We head there," he said, pointing to the trees. "Water. Cover." Ayasha nodded and didn't ask questions. By midday, they reached the grove. A thin stream ran through it, barely a trickle, but enough to drink and wash. The ground was soft underfoot, blanketed with fallen needles. They tied the horse in the shade, checked the tree line for signs of others. Nothing. No boot prints. No ash. No broken branches. Safe for now. They made camp again. Small. Controlled. Just a patch of flat earth. A fire built low, surrounded by stones. Ayasha found dead branches while Eli whittled a stake to repair the saddle strap. He glanced at her every so often, tracking her movements. The way her limp had almost disappeared now. The way she no longer looked over her shoulder every few minutes. After they ate, she sat cross-legged near the fire and asked the question he'd been expecting for some time. "What did you do after the war? Before this?" Eli didn't answer right away. He stared at the fire a long moment. "Hunted men," he said finally. Her face didn't change. "For money." He nodded. "Bounties. The bad ones. Killers. Robbers." But sometimes it didn't matter. A name on paper, a reward pinned under it. "You killed them. Some. Others I dragged in. Most didn't make it far." Ayasha looked into the fire. "Is that who you are?" He shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." "Then who are you now?" Eli glanced at her. "I don't know yet." She held his gaze. "You're not a hunter anymore. You're not a soldier. You're not running. That's something." He didn't argue. After a long silence, she leaned closer and said, "You saved me." He shook his head. "No, I didn't shoot you. That's not the same." "You stayed," she said. "You still are." Eli didn't speak, but something in his jaw loosened. She wasn't wrong. Later that evening, when the shadows began to stretch and the air cooled, they heard movement, distant but not wildlife. The crunch of hooves, the low murmur of voices. Eli stood fast, rifle in hand. He moved to the tree line and crouched. Ayesha joined him, crouching low beside a fallen log. Two riders, moving slow along the far edge of the basin, across the plain, not toward them, but not far. One had a long coat, the other a red scarf tied around his neck. Both carried rifles across their backs. Ayesha whispered them. Eli nodded. Could be. Do we run again? He watched them another few seconds. The riders passed without stopping, kept heading south. No, he said. We stay low. Let them keep moving. They waited until the riders were out of sight, then waited longer still. When it was finally dark, they let the fire burn down to coals and sat close together under the trees, sharing the blanket, watching the sky turn black between the branches. Ayesha turned to him. When will it end? Eli looked at her, then up at the sky. When you say it does. I want it to, she said, but I don't know how. He nodded. We'll figure it out. She rested her head against his chest, just beneath his collarbone, and for the first time, he let his arm rest around her shoulders without hesitating. They didn't talk again that night, but there was no more running in the dark. And whatever came next, they'd meet it together, not as strangers, not as fugitives, but as two people who had chosen not to leave. The next morning broke warm. The first time in weeks the sun touched their skin without sting. Eli stood at the edge of the grove, hands resting on his belt, eyes scanning the flat horizon. No riders, no dust, no sound beyond wind through pine and the distant murmur of the stream behind him. For the first time in a long while, he felt the pull in his chest begin to loosen, not gone, but lighter. Not dread, not instinct, just quiet. Ayesha was behind him, kneeling at the water's edge. She was washing her hands, slowly, like it mattered now. She had stripped her sleeves to the elbow, her hair tied back tight, her face clean. She looked different, not safe, she'd never looked that, but steady and present. She was not someone hiding anymore. She was someone deciding. When she stood and walked toward him, Eli turned. She was carrying her pack, tied neat and tight, not like someone ready to run, but like someone preparing for something to last. I think I'm done, she said. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her, trying to read if she meant today or forever. She clarified. Running, hiding, flinching. Eli asked, You sure? She gave a short nod. I am. They didn't need to discuss what that meant. Eli understood. If she stopped, he stopped. That had been made clear in the days and nights before. But this time it felt final. Not just a rest, but a landing. He turned toward the trail behind them, then looked back at the grove. There's a place about 3 days from here, he said. Northwest, up in the shallow hills. No roads, no towns, just an old mill and a half-collapsed barn. The man who owned it died some years back. Place is still standing. Safe. Safe enough. Water nearby. Soil's good. Roof needs fixing, but it's out of the way. Nobody comes that far unless they're looking for nothing. She considered this. Then, do you want to live there? I didn't. Not alone. He waited for her to look at him. She did. Now, she said nothing, just walked to his side and rested her hand on his arm. That was her answer. They packed up camp. Slowly this time. No rush. Ayesha helped fit the blanket across the saddle, cinched the bags herself. Her movements were quiet but certain. She moved like she belonged where she stood. As they walked the horse out of the trees, Eli glanced back at the stream, the stone ring of their last fire, the space where they'd first stood close without fear. He didn't say goodbye. Some places don't need farewells. They rode north by west, following no marked trail, just the shifts in land he remembered from a lifetime ago. The days stretched wide and quiet. No signs of pursuit. No riders. No smoke on the horizon. Ayasha took the rifle sometimes, rode with it slung across her back. Eli taught her how to sight a shot, how to breathe steady before pulling the trigger. She learned fast. At night, they shared the fire evenly, took turns cooking, cutting wood, watching the stars in silence. One night, as they sat across from each other with only a pan of boiled beans between them, Ayasha said, "You're not a hunter anymore." "No." "You're not a drifter either." "No." "Then what are you?" Eli looked at her. The firelight caught the edge of her face, her scarred wrist, the tilt of her head as she waited. "Yours," he said. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. The third day brought them to the edge of the hill country. The barn stood gray and bowed, with one side split from time, but still upright. The millstone out back had cracked in two. The door hung crooked, but inside there was space, dry, quiet, waiting. No signs of recent use, just the smell of dust and pine. They didn't talk about what to do next. They just started. Eli cleared the floorboards while Ayasha hauled the broken shutters outside. She found a rusted shovel and began digging a trench to drain rainwater from the front wall. He fixed a broken hinge on the door. She swept out the debris. At night, they spread their blankets beside the hearth and built the first fire of the rest of their lives. Ayasha leaned into him, rested her head against his chest. "Do you regret not shooting me?" she asked. He didn't answer at first, just wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "No," he said. "That's the one thing I've never doubted." She closed her eyes. Me neither. The wind outside blew hard against the walls, but inside there was warmth, breath, and stillness. No one was coming. No one was chasing. And at last, there was nowhere left to go, because they had already arrived.